Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us today for our Ask a Technology Recruiter Anything event. I am Samantha Herscher from Talentfoot Executive Search and Staffing's marketing team. At Talentfoot, we partner with a wide range of companies from Series B funded startups to Fortune 50 giants to help them find proven talent in sales, marketing, technology, advertising, and HR. Today, we've got something special lined up for you. We're going to be diving deep into the world of technology hiring, and we've got a true expert to answer all of your questions. Bromley is a partner at our firm and the technology practice team lead. He has over 12 years of experience in recruiting, working with high growth organizations and Fortune 500 companies to find the perfect tech candidates. His areas of specialization include software engineering, technology leadership, think CTO, CIO recruiting, product management, and data and analytics. Tim is an expert in working with companies and finding the right talent in the industries of health tech, healthcare services, fintech, and niche SaaS organizations. Tim, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited.
We're gonna pick Tim's brain. We got a bunch of questions. But first, before we dive into those, I think it would be really great, Tim, if you gave us kind of a little bit of overview of the technology hiring market, because I'm sure people are curious what you're seeing out there.
Yeah, I think it's been a roller coaster over the past 2 to 3 years. And I think it's best to look at sort of history from the start of the pandemic. As employers, employees, recruiters, we were all in this together through that, March 2020 timeframe through September 2020. It was a lot of wait and see mode, and that was sort of the phrase that was going around in the recruiting world. It was, well, companies aren't hiring right now. There's a lot of candidates that are, or even employees that were furloughed and that weren't quite making a paycheck. We were wondering when things were going to turn back on, and then September hits and everything went bonkers. I mean, everyone started hiring again, but the biggest change there, everybody was hiring remotely. And that was a huge change for our normal day to day worker. So in 2021, we saw employees gaining huge advantage with remote work, higher paying jobs. I think we would see in the technology sector, I can speak to sometimes 20, 30, 40% an increase in salary, which was very shocking during that time. And so 2021 was a huge year for everybody. So we saw this huge incline in just overall productivity as a recruiter and just the job market. And then you fast forward a little bit through the start of 2022, we're still on that high of 21, but it's been about a year and a couple of months where we just, almost came to a screeching halt. Sitting in the recruiter chair, we had companies that started going through layoffs again. Like, here we go again. So we go through the layoffs, company-wide layoffs, just overall reduction in force, companies closing. Of course, we're seeing a lot of big buzz out there with big tech companies, and you're seeing all that stuff in the news. But small and medium-sized companies that were in that high growth mode for years have now come to a screeching halt because investors are then saying, hey, we're ready for our return on investment. We're not seeing it. We got to pull back spend. So there's a lot of things happening in the global economy. So realistically, for the past year and a couple of months, it's been a whirlwind. But in technology, we have seen a huge hit with layoffs. And I'm not saying just top technology professionals, but maybe it's a technology-driven company. So we, as a firm, we focus a lot, for example, in the marketing and advertising industry. A direct example would be we work with ad tech partners that they have their customers that they're supporting. If their customers are reducing spend, then they, in turn, the ad tech company is then lowering their revenue due to that. And then they're having to make some operational decisions of cutting costs and going through layoffs and so forth. So we, as recruiters that focus in that industry, we have seen that direct impact. So we're sort of on the sidelines along with candidates that are part of layoffs in some ways, scratching our head like, where do we make an impact in the market today?
Well said. um, Kind of just as a direct reflection of what you were just discussing, we've had a couple of questions come in already about differentiating yourself in this market because, as you said, there's been lots of layoffs. There's so many candidates in the market that are looking for a new job. One person emailed us and said that they have applied to so many different places, and the only time they heard from somebody was when they sent an email to HR identifying themselves as a good candidate. And Ishan says in the comments, when current job postings receive 500 to 1,000 resumes, recruiters don't even look beyond resume 20 or 30. Should you even apply when you see over 200 applicants? How do you get noticed? So I think a lot of people really want to know how did they get your attention when
Yeah.
you got a job posting? Because I've seen some of your listings on LinkedIn. It's true. You get hundreds, if not over 1,000 applicants.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's a great point, Sean. I think that is probably the biggest challenge today as we're thinking about being involved in your job search. So I'll take a step back. We'll get to that point, but I made a post about 8 months ago about 5 or 6 seemed like basic steps at the time. Advice from a recruiter to as you're entering the job market or if you're affected by a layoff. Some of those tips were first take a deep breath, know that you're not alone in this, go into this whole situation with confidence, update your resume with the most up-to-date tech stack that you're working on, most up-to-date projects, latest skills, making sure that resume is up to snug. And then from a social perspective on LinkedIn, as a recruiter, I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a main source of candidates just as much as it is using our database or any other avenue. Like LinkedIn is heavily used by recruiters. So making sure your LinkedIn is up to date, with relevant information and updated picture, things like that. So, but my 4 main points today on that, and Ishan will cover this, is when you talk about, well, we just talked about the LinkedIn being up to date, but don't be afraid to put that you're open to work. There's 2 different types of open to work on LinkedIn. You can go to your profile page and click "I'm open to work" and not have the green banner, and that basically tells recruiters, whether corporate recruiters or headhunters, agency recruiters, that you are open to hearing about new opportunities. So let's say you are currently working, you don't want your current employer to know that, you can click that tag and you can actually showcase to recruiters that you're open to hear about new opportunities. So I think that's first and foremost, whether you're working or not working and you're in the job market, that's something you should do. Don't be afraid to put the green banner on the profile pic. I think a couple years ago when that first started, there was a lot of bias back and forth, and there may still be some bias around it. But at the end of the day, we are all in this together. We are all going through these situations together. So don't be afraid to put yourself out there. As it relates to applying to a position, perfect example. I posted a job right before the July 4th weekend. It was a software engineer position in a particular location. I had 3 main bits of criteria that I needed to have for the candidate. I received 180 applications in 3 days, and 90% of the people that I was looking at were not meeting the qualifications of really being on site or being in the area. And the point there is that it's if you are that 5% that do meet the criteria, you can be overlooked. As much as we talk about AI, as much as we talk about technology being involved and having the key buzzwords in your resume, at the end of the day, a recruiter like myself is still scanning profiles, and it's easy to be overlooked because you're being inundated with so many applicants. So, to the point around how do you stand out? Well, reaching out to the recruiter in addition to applying to the position could help you stand out. If you send an in-mail or an email to me directly or to a hiring manager or to an internal TA person, just stating, hey, I applied to this position, I'm interested here, would love to be considered for X, Y, and Z. Look to see if you have any connections whatsoever on LinkedIn at that employer. I think that could go a long way by dropping them a note saying, hey, I just applied to this position. I'm not sure if you know who the hiring manager is, but maybe you know that person. They can sort of make mention to the hiring manager that you have a connection that applied. So going those extra steps beyond just applying to the role, knowing that there's hundreds, if not thousands, of people applying, can help differentiate. My last comment on this is networking in person. I think we've all gotten lost in what we're doing right now. As great as this is, Samantha's in Chicago and I'm down in Jacksonville, Florida, and we're colleagues, and this is wonderful. But networking in person during a job search is critical. And I think we've all gotten a little spoiled in some ways over the past few years in this digital age. So in one way, it's great. But I also have seen in Jacksonville more meetups start to happen more frequently. I started getting back involved with some in-person events that I used to do for years in my tech recruiting career here in Jacksonville. And the The amount of people there is fantastic. So I think the networking opportunities are there. An example could be, you go to an event, you talk to somebody, maybe they're more on a peer-to-peer level, and you're like, "Hey, I'm a software engineer. Hey, I'm a software engineer. I just happen to be out of work." And you start talking, and then what if that person says, "Hey, actually, my company's hiring. We're a 20-person sort of startup mode company. We don't even have a TA department. We don't even have job postings, but send me your resume and I'll get it to the hand of my boss." Like, you would never have had that opportunity to apply because you never know what kind of job opportunities you could uncover by being in person.
Um, okay, I have a question. I just want to back up to something you were just talking about, emailing the recruiter. So,
Sure.
um, is it okay? Is it a faux pas, if I were to send a message to at a company, let's say Google, um, should I can I send a message to the hiring manager and then also internal TA? Like, is it bad to be kind of hitting from both angles? Is it seen as being overzealous, or is it a mark against you, or is it just do what you can because you're trying to stand out?
It's a great question. I would err on the side of aggression more than caution,
Okay.
especially um, if we're unemployed, especially if we've been unemployed for a while, and we need to make sure we're standing out. But to your question, look at the size company. Let's say it's a 150-person company. There's one talent acquisition manager. Seems like they're the gatekeeper to get in for any kind of application, whether you apply online, whether you're recruited directly by them. Try that angle first.
Mhm.
But maybe it's not getting anywhere for whatever reason. I don't think it's a bad idea to go to a hiring manager and drop them a note. Um, I think on the receiving end, on either side of that, you're they're not used to getting that kind of attention. And I think the fact that you're putting yourself out there, not only did I apply, but I also want to express interest directly in the role. Could it be seen as annoying at times? Yeah, if you're emailing them over and over and over again. But hopefully that could kind of stimulate some kind of response. And I
Mhm.
think one of our questions, somebody had a direct example of that working out for them in their favor.
Cool. Okay. Thanks, Tim. We had some other questions sent ahead of time, so I want to dig into them. Okay. So what should a candidate do? How should they address the topic of being laid off in an interview?
Yeah, great question. I think going back into what we've already talked about, that we're sort of all in this together, kind of, mindset. It's pretty obvious of what's going on right now with hundreds of thousands of people being laid off over the past, year or two. So, um, you know, I think one piece of advice I would have is going a little further than just explaining I was part of the layoff. And it can be easy to put that in the past. And I don't blame anybody. If I'm interviewing a candidate that I want to submit to a position and say, "Hey, saw that you ended your position in May of 2023. Tell me why you ended there." Like, I don't want to directly assume that you're a part of the layoff, but maybe you were thinking that I assumed that. I was part of a reduction in force or part of a layoff. Like, that tells a story, and that can be totally fine. But going back to the first question, is stand out a little bit more. Maybe you understand more the why behind it. Maybe you understand, hey, there was a merger with a bigger company. Our company was not doing very well, and a bigger company in our same industry saw as an opportunity to acquire us. And when that acquisition happened, my role and my team was duplicated. So unfortunately, we were affected by that change. Like, that tells more of a story, so that when I'm representing you with my client, it's explaining a little bit of that, not just we were working with a company that was bootstrapping it, just couldn't make ends meet on payroll, and whatever. Like, I just think that that could have a better story to it. It could be, hey, like the ad tech example, we were a direct reflection of lower revenue due to our client spend. It creates more of a business conversation around it versus just saying I was part of the layoff. Let's move on.
Yeah, I was gonna say that it shows a little soft skill, like, or I don't know,
True.
also like your business acumen, like you recognize that you are not just sitting at your desk, being a software engineer. There's a bigger organization around you, and there's lots of pieces at play.
Right.
Okay, let's see. We've got when it comes to executive search, what stands out to you from an executive portfolio point of view?
Well, I think not sure of the viewers or attendees, like if everybody's executive, or maybe we have some folks that are junior in their career, maybe senior in their career, maybe they're a software engineer or web designer. So I want to answer that in like two ways. One, from an executive standpoint, as an executive recruiter, what stands out to me? Well, I would say obviously a resume. I think the resume or portfolio, if you will, 2 or 3 pages max. I think from a technology standpoint is super relevant. You start to get lengthy in the resume, and 7, 8, 9 pages, it gets a little daunting at times. But you can really pack a lot into those 2 or 3 pages and serve it more as like your high level executive profile. Really going into high level details about key success metrics that you've hit in throughout your career. Highlighting some of the bigger organizations you've worked for, the industries that you focus in. Maybe you're talking about your last position. One thing that I love to see is this person worked at company X, and they put in parentheses, certain industry and size company, whether it's a $2 billion company or a $500 million company or a $50 million company. Like, I don't know. I'm going to have to either find that out through conversation, or I'm going to have to research it to understand, is this person that's been doing this for 10 years, they fit the mold of like my client, what my client's looking for. So I think that could be a good thing to put in. Some other things that will come out through conversation that you could mention in your sub bullets of that job are team size, what your reporting structure looked like, the types of people that reported to you. Like if you were a CTO over a 300-person organization, maybe you had 8 direct reports and then everybody else funneled underneath there. That's something that will come out in conversation, but it's good for me to know. And then the biggest thing that we're seeing a lot, especially with SaaS companies, is product-driven organizations, are P&L responsibility. As a CTO, having P&L understanding and financial acumen, that goes a long, long way in today's market. Understanding not only just budgets, but how the P&L is broken down and driving revenue. Now, on the other side of things, when you talk about junior to senior level, individual contributors, I'll give an example of a web designer. My team, we've been working a lot with product designers, web designers, and web developers. And every single one of our clients ask for a portfolio. And that portfolio could be a website to links to their recent work. Maybe it's just a little bit more than just their resume. It's an opportunity to showcase your skills. Sometimes they have samples of code, so they could have some kind of link to the code that they created for a certain web page. So I think that's just a great way, linking back to that first question, to differentiate yourself in the market. Because as a recruiter, I'm representing a web developer for a position with my client. I'm very early on saying, hey, I'm trying to drive the client's attention to this portfolio. Like, I can say all I want about them as a candidate and how great they are, and give some logistical things and talk about their compensation requirements and where they're at in the market. But go check out their portfolio. Go see for yourself. And I think that that's very telling for not only employers, but for recruiters.
To that point, I would say that last year we did an event about freelancing and portfolio tips. And I know it's not a complete one-to-one, exactly the same, but the tips I think really translate. So maybe if our colleague Anna is listening, she could put a link to that those portfolio tips in the chat so you guys can download them, because I think it would be super useful. Okay, let's see. What else have we got here? I see a question here in the comments, and it ties in with one we got ahead of time. It's, have education requirements become more flexible, or do they remain stringent for tech roles? And the question here on the chat from Basil is, do recruiters prefer university graduates or boot camp graduates? So I think similar question there.
Yeah. So I've been in the recruiting industry for over 12 years, all technology. And early in my career, I supported a few clients that were financial services related, healthcare related, just highly regulated environments that have very strict requirements around software engineers, for example, or a business analyst having some kind of degree that was relevant to the job that they're doing. So I always had this sort of bias that you had to have a degree in that field early in my career. And as I've sort of evolved in recruiting, you talk to so many talented individuals that, whether they went to school or not, for whatever reason they decided not to finish or whatever the case may be, are very talented individuals. So you see both sides of the spectrum. But to answer the question, especially since I've joined Talentfoot, working more on a national scale, working with a lot of high growth organizations versus your big Fortune 500, those requirements have lessened. Like I don't see it as much. As it relates to the boot camp, I think the boot camp has served a great purpose and continues to serve a great purpose. I mean, there's been a huge talent gap and talent shortage over the past several years as it relates to software engineering. And I know a lot of folks that are involved in that from a business standpoint about upskilling and reskilling and going through these boot camps, and it serves a fantastic purpose. And what it does as a job seeker, if you are in a boot camp, make sure that you are not only going to the boot camp to put on your resume and create the resume and have the skills necessary, but do whatever you can to network with people that are already in the field. Like try to find a mentor, try to find somebody that can mentor you beyond just the boot camp. And I think that could help you sort of see the other side of things because it can be a little frustrating as you're applying to jobs and you're putting all your relevant experience, but maybe it only is the boot camp. Maybe it's only your projects. I think it's the capstone projects they call it towards the end. So finding a mentor would be my biggest piece of advice for someone there.
Um, Now I think you kind of answered this question with what you just said, but let me know if you have anything that you want to add on. How can candidates demonstrate their adaptability and willingness to learn new technologies to potential employers?
One more time.
How can candidates demonstrate their adaptability and willingness to learn new technologies to potential employers? And I feel
Yeah.
like you kind of just answered that with,
Yeah.
but is there anything else that you might consider?
Yeah. I had a recent example. It's a certain software engineering job that had a certain tech stack. The candidate that I was representing had most of his experience was a different tech stack, but he tinkered a little bit in this, employer's tech stack that we were submitting him to. And it was enough to have like real good, relevant, meaningful conversation with the hiring manager. And they're still in the interview process right now. They've already moved through progression. And I remember talking to the hiring manager after round one. They said, the tech stack doesn't quite line up, but the principles, like the
Mhm.
understanding of technology and sort of like the basic structure and understanding is there. And just the fact that this person is doing like side projects and different things to enhance their skill and an ability to talk to it, I think that will allow the hiring manager to see, okay, this person has a passion for what they're doing. They have the willingness to learn and pick up new technologies. Like to me, that's my biggest piece of advice that I would give to somebody that may be struggling with that.
And what about, how can, developers or anyone in tech showcase their soft skills? I know that at Talentfoot, we talk a lot about hard skills get you the job or get you the interview, soft skills get you the job. So, of course, this is important for
Yeah.
all types of talent. So, what can you say on that topic?
Yeah, I think showing examples or willingness or being aware that maybe this is not just a heads down role, just cranking out code. Like you have to work cross functionally with your product teams, with your business analysts, with your testers, with your project managers, like, up to leadership and, horizontal amongst peers. Like you have to know that that's part of the role. So, experience, I think, with soft skills is ultimately the best thing to sort of get over that hump. But I think just knowing that you have to communicate cross functionally in general. You just again the experience. You just got to get out there and do it, right? You just got to be able to showcase it through that experience, and you'll be able to feel a lot better about the soft skills as you mature and grow.
David is asking, what would you recommend for a career change person? I was an accountant for 5 years, then quit to get my master's in CS because I want to be a programmer. But it seems I only get people asking if I want accounting roles.
Yeah. That is a
So,
common thing. That's okay. That's a common thing. In fact, I'm working with an executive right now who, he's a marketer and has been involved in companies as a marketer for a while, but he's also been a product person. product leader, and in some cases, he's led technology organizations, and he wants to go more down the CTO path. He wants to be a technology leader, and I congratulated him recently on a position that he had landed a marketing role. So he's like, although I'm still doing this, my goal is to get down to the technology path. So patience, one, but two, maybe reducing like the amount of accounting verbiage in a resume or your portfolio or your profile, and enhancing more of the technology. So like almost make it seem like, yeah, you have a career in accounting, like you have real world experience, but focus back on that education piece or on the CS degree. Um, Maybe it's programming, but maybe it's data. Maybe it's data related, data science, data and analytics. Maybe it's a different path to sort of parallel the two. Could be a good take. But I think ultimately, just maybe even a mentor. Finding a mentor that's made a job change before, or just the more you talk about it, the more you could find some clarity on that path you're going to go down. And heck, talk to recruiters. I mean, we talk to candidates all the time that are interested in making a job change, and we have successfully helped people make a job change. So you just may need to identify that right recruiter to help with that transition.
What about, you touched on this a little bit, but I just want to go back to it. Resume length. One page, is 2 pages okay?
Yeah, I think obviously if you have a 20, 30-year career, it's hard to put it all in 1 to 2 pages at times. So I think you just got to look, one rule of thumb is, hey, let's go back 10 years or 15 years, or hey, let's just sort of 3 bullets per job. But for me as a recruiter, like 1 to 2 pages is ideal. I think anything longer than that, I'm not saying I'm getting bored, but I'm starting to like get further and further down the rabbit hole of like, wait, that experience on page 6 is no longer relevant to what you have been doing recently, which what I really want to talk to you about. So I would recommend, 2 pages, 3 pages, probably max.
Yeah, and I was just thinking, what we started talking about at the top, the market is flooded with candidates. And so the longer the resume, a recruiter has a finite amount of time, right? And so they might not spend that time with a much longer resume. So we've got 2 minutes left. I want to address something really quickly that I saw that some people talking about networking in person and
Mhm.
how it can be challenging and people are networking less. And as I saw that dialogue going on, something came to my mind that I wanted to share. I think one thing that might be useful is to consider networking outside of your typical groups or typical places. So um, I am not super well informed on all of the different tech groups. I know you've talked about one in Jacksonville, and I'm sure there are many in Chicago. But some other things to think about would be like the Chamber of Commerce or just general executive groups. Like in Chicago, there's a Chicago Executive Club or young professionals. There's lots of different places that you can go that might not be your typical place where you can still meet people that would be really helpful for your career, like entrepreneur meetups, any of those different types of things. I would suggest that you kind of look outside the typical networking places and see what you can find.
Nailed it. Yeah, great advice.
Okay, we've got less than a minute left. So, anything you want to close out on, Tim, before I give our closing remarks?
I want to just encourage people, candidates that are, whether out of work right now or in the job market, just stay encouraged, stay active. Again, know that you're not alone in this, but at the same time, you could be competing for a job. And I think, putting your best foot forward and not just clicking apply to a job to think that's going to get it done. It's not going to happen in today's market. You really have to step out, differentiate yourself. And I'll just throw out there, if anybody wants to talk through that, through chat, through LinkedIn, or set up a call, feel free to reach out to me or any of the recruiters on our team afterwards. We'd love to connect with you. Because this market will turn, this market will change. We've seen this time and time again. That's what we're talking about in our search firm, that we're calling it a little bit of a soft market. That employers aren't using recruiters as much right now, but this will change. And we all need to stay relevant, and we all just need to put our best foot forward.
Tim, thank you so much for joining me. I think you gave some fantastic insights, some things that you didn't even share with me on our prep call. So, thanks so
Good.
much. I want to thank our audience for joining us today. Please make sure that you connect with Tim and me on LinkedIn and subscribe to Talentfoot's LinkedIn newsletter. We include great tips there for job searching and just relevant content to you, whether you're in tech or in digital business. So thanks for joining, and we'll see you all soon.
Thanks, Ian.
Thanks.